Let's remove the wheel, 19mm socket, remove all 5 of your lug nuts. With this last one, the hubcap's going to want to come off, so take that off, of course, if you have steel wheels and if you have the hubcap. If not, don't worry about it. And remove the wheel. Sometimes they're stuck on like this, and if tapping them doesn't work, I'm going to grab a rubber mallet and hit it from the backside. But before I do that, I want to put on a lug nut for safety. That way the tire and wheel don't go flying off when I hit it. There we go. Remove your safety lug nut and remove the wheel. 32mm socket, let's remove this axle nut. Next, you want to make sure that this axle pushes through the hub. With an 18mm socket, I'm going to remove both of these bolts, and that's going to get us the caliper bracket off of the knuckle. Leave this one in a few threads, that way this is held on when I remove the top one. Now remove both of them. I like to put my caliper up on the strut here, and I'm going to tie it with a bungee cord, that way it's not putting any pressure on this brake hose. And now you can remove the rotor. With an 18mm, remove the tie rod stud nut. Hammer here, hit the knuckle, that'll pop the tire out of the knuckle. Set that aside. Next, with an 18mm socket, I'm going to remove this ball joint nut. In order to separate the ball joint from the control arm, I'm going to use a pickle fork since we're replacing it, so we don't care about the boot. Usually pickle forks will damage the boot, so don't use them unless you're replacing a ball joint. Nope. Okay, looks like this one popped free. There you have it. So this doesn't usually happen. Typically you'd want to use the pickle fork, hammer it in, and that's going to separate the two. So pull these two apart. On the back side of the knuckle, you'll see the ABS sensor that's held on with a 10mm bolt. Remove the bolt. Now I'm going to try and break free this ABS sensor from the knuckle. Sometimes this doesn't work, and in that case we'll have to take a different route, basically disconnect it from inside the engine compartment, follow the wire up, but usually this is the best thing to do because then you don't have a long wire dangling by your knuckle when you're removing it. Disconnect it from here, off the top of the knuckle. I'm going to take some pliers, just try to twist this sensor up and down a little bit in order to break it free. You can spray it with rust penetrant if you think it's necessary. Mine seems to be breaking free. I just need to keep working at it. I'm going to try and stick this screwdriver behind it to hopefully help pry it away as I'm twisting. I can fit my trim tool in here, pry it straight out. There we go. So this is what it's getting stuck on because it goes in so deep. It's basically rusting itself in there, but with enough rust penetrant and persuasion, you can take it out. Now you want to put this somewhere safe. You don't want to just let it dangle and hit on things because it is a very delicate piece. Now the 21mm socket, let's remove these two nuts that hold the strut onto the knuckle. This is the last thing that's holding the knuckle onto the car. There's one, there's two. Drive these bolts through. If they're stuck in here, you can put the nut flush with the bolt and then hammer it through. Push your axle through, pop it out, and now hold the knuckle, pull your last bolt out, remove your knuckle. Here it is. Now let's press this ball joint out. I'm going to remove this backing plate, 3 10mm bolts. So here's what's happening. I thought that by removing the backing plate, I could get the screwdriver in from the front side. You can see it has a slot there, and turn this snap ring around. It turns out that I can't because my screwdriver the snap ring, the way it's positioned, is just too far for this to reach. So I'm going to try to lift up with this pry bar. What I'm trying to do is break free the snap ring on this side. Oh, there we go. That's what I want. Yep. And it's actually not turning, it's coming off because it's stuck down there, and it's actually just expanding as I'm turning it. So that's good. At this point, I'm going to take a little pry bar, pry it out like this, with a screwdriver up at the same time. Try and stick this screwdriver through here so it doesn't fall back in. Don't fall back in. Okay, so that's out of the groove here. Now you have to unlodge it from down there. So I'm just going to massage it gently. There we go. Okay. Ideally, you'd want to do one of these. So now you'll need a ball joint press. I'm going to put the ball joint press right up against the top there, and then I'm going to slide in this cup that has to fit over that lip of the ball joint. I'm going to position it all where it needs to go, just like this. And then as I drive this in, it's going to pull down on the top, press the ball joint into my cup. I won't be able to completely remove it with this just because it needs to go down further than this can actually receive it. So we'll have to do something different afterwards, but at least this will bring it down a little bit and break it free from the knuckle. So let's go for it. That's as far as I can go with it. There we go. There's your lower ball joint. There are a couple of sharp edges here that I'm just going to take a file to and file them away. This is nice and smooth now, ready for the new ball joint. To install it, you could potentially do it with this, but it might be a little difficult. If you have a cup that's narrow enough to fit in here, but also wide enough to receive the ball joint, then go for it. The way I'm going to do it though is I'm just going to slide it in like this and just use a hammer, tap it through. I'm going to slightly lubricate this, that way it eases the installation process. It's not going to affect how well it sits in there because there's going to be a snap ring anyway. And like I said, I'm just going to use my hammer. Make sure you have a cup that sits on the outer edge of this ball joint here. You don't want it on the boot. And when you tap, definitely don't tap on the stud. Perfect. This is seated all the way. Take the new snap ring and we'll drive it down on here. I'm going to try and put it at as much of an angle as possible to make it easier for the next person to remove this if needed. There we go. All right, ball joint's locked in. I'm going to put my backing plate back on, put on the 3 10mm bolts, and snug them up. Now take the knuckle, slide it up on the axle, and put one of the bolts in through the strut. That way you can let go. Might as well go ahead and put the other one through. And even though I'm not going to tighten them yet, I'm going to put the 2 nuts back on. That way these can't come out. There we go. Now it's secure here. Slide the axle through. There we go. Let's put the ABS sensor back in. Slide it down. Make sure it goes in all the way. And secure it with the little 10mm bolt. Nice and snug. Just so I can make things line up better, I'm going to put the ball joint into the control arm. I'm going to just leave it like this for now. Put the ABS sensor back in on the top of the knuckle here. Now put the ball joint nut on, snug it up, and torque it to 70 foot-pounds. Okay, that's it right there. My cotter pin hole actually does line up perfectly. If yours doesn't, always tighten, never loosen to line it up. Stick your cotter pin through and bend it over to lock it in. Put the tie rod end back through the knuckle, start the nut on, and we'll snug it up. $63 foot-pounds for this. Let's get the rotor back on. Now my hub is clean and covered with anti-seize. If yours is not, clean it up and cover it with anti-seize. And my rotor is new, but if your rotor is rusty, clean up the backside where it mounts. Take your caliper, slide it over the rotor, line up the 2 bolt holes, start in the 2 caliper bolts. If you wanted to put anything on these, put thread locker, not anti-seize or grease. Snug these 2 up. Torque these to 97 foot-pounds. 103 foot-pounds for both of these. That's 1, and that's 2. Perfect. Put the axle nut back on. I'm going to bottom it out with my impact gun, and then we'll torque it. I'm going to put my long pry bar going through the lug studs to prevent this from spinning, and I'm going to torque this to 118 foot-pounds. All right, that's that right there. Get the wheel back on. And if you have hubcaps, go ahead and put them on now because the lug nuts are what hold the hubcaps in. And you have this little cutout here that has to line up with your valve stem. So line that up. Automatically your lug nuts will line up with the holes in the hubcaps. Put on all 5 of your lug nuts, snug them up, and torque them to 100 foot-pounds.